In this tutorial, we are jumping into the making of the Advent Calendar crochet pattern. Hi, I'm Lindsay with Off the Beaten Hook. Make sure you check out the link in the description box, which will take you to the full written pattern for free on my blog. This video is going to cover different parts of the Advent Calendar in the making, but it does not cover every single stitch. Otherwise, this would be the length of like an epic film, which nobody really wants in a crochet tutorial. What I think is so special about this Advent Calendar design is I made it to where the pockets are actually big enough to put little goodies in, and the ideas are endless. I include a whole bunch of them on my blog post, all the way from little activities that you can do to goodies to little gifts, something to mix it up and make it fun and different every day. So make sure to check out the blog post. Again, the link to that is in the description box, and you can find all of those ideas there for you. So click that link, get the pattern. I hope you love it. If you do, please subscribe to my channel, like this video, all that good stuff. Enjoy. Let's dive in. My preferred method when working with this style of crochet is to work with multiple balls of yarn. I do not prefer to carry my yarn. It slows me down, and so I just would rather do my color changes and work for multiple balls of yarn per section. The design on this one is really simple, so you would just need to be using 2 balls of the natural colored, and then we're working with the trunk right now, and then we'll move to working with the green tree right in the center. So for me, that is my preferred way of doing it for this pattern. What I did is I just made a cake off of this spool of Lion Brand yarn, and then I'm just working with this scrap ball of brown. It's some cotton that I had on hand. You do have to be a little bit more organized when you're working this way. Every couple to few rows you want to stop and make sure that these aren't getting all tangled up as you make your turns. Sometimes that happens. Again, it's not that big of a deal. It's still more worth it for me to do that than to try to carry my yarn along. So I'm going to show you how to do your color changes with this type of color changing when you're using multiple balls. One of my tips with working with this type of tapestry crochet so that it's easier to keep track of your even and odd rows, especially if you're using a graph like it comes with this pattern, is to mark your either your even row or your odd row. What I do is after my very first row, I come down and I mark that with a stitch marker so that I know anytime I am working a row in that direction, I am working on an odd numbered row. That is my right side of my work. So it helps me to know when I'm making my color changes what side to drop my non-working yarn to, as I always keep that on the wrong side. This is a one-sided project. The back does not matter what it looks like. It keeps it pretty clean the way that we're doing our color changes, but it reminds me that I don't need to stress out if I have some color change thing going on the back side that isn't that pretty. I just keep all my color changes on the back side, and I will show you how I do that. So in this case, I know that anytime I'm working towards this orange stitch marker, I'm working on my the front of my project. You can always just put a stitch marker somewhere here on the front after you get a couple rows done, or somewhere in the middle, so you can just always keep track of the front and you know that that's the right side of your work. All right, so now since I'm working a row away from my stitch marker, I'm working in this direction. I know this is an even numbered row, and this is the wrong side of the work, because whenever I'm working an even numbered row, I'm on the wrong side of my work on this pattern. So I'm going to show you how I come along and make my color change here and how I drop my non-working yarn to the wrong side. So I'm coming in on my last stitch of the natural color on this section. Okay, so I'm a little bit closer up here. So I'm going to take my yarn that I just dropped, and instead of dropping it to the back and bringing in the new color like this, like we're used to, I am actually going to drop the color to the wrong side, which again is the side that's facing me right now. So it always keeps all those edges or all those ends onto the wrong side of the work. So before I make my final yarn over for the color change, I'm just going to bring that one to the wrong side. So I'm bringing it here right in front. And then I am picking up my new color and completing that final stitch, so that next time I come around, this will already be on the wrong side. And then continuing on with my color. Okay, so I'll make my way across this trunk here, and I'll show you that again as I transition back to the natural color on this side of the tree trunk. All right, so I'm coming along again. I'm about to do another color change back to the natural color. So I'm doing my last stitch in the brown. Before I do my color change, I'm going to drop this color to the front, keeping that on the wrong side. And then I'm going to pick up my new color and complete the stitch in my new color and carry on with that new color. So that is how you're going to do your color changes on this project. So this is the wrong side, and when you flip it over, you have this really nice, clean right side with your color changes all staying on the back. So I will finish off this row and come around on the right side of the project and show you what your color changes look like on that side, which is probably a lot more of the way that you are used to doing it. Again, are always marking your front. After I got a few rows in, placed a stitch marker on the front here right in the middle so that I know every time I'm seeing this, I'm working on the right side, right? And all of our color changes are staying to the back. I'm going to show you how we are going to do our color change here at the trunk. So I'm finishing up this section of the natural color on the right side of the trunk. Okay, as I come in to make my final stitch, I am going to drop my working yarn, or my working yarn to the back. That is now going to become my non-working yarn. And I'm going to pick up my brown, and I'm going to finish that last stitch of natural in my brown. And now I am ready to continue on. After I make the first couple stitches in my new color, I do come back and just give a little tug on that last color and make sure the tension at that color change looks right. Make sure those stitches look like they are the same tension, and then I continue on. So whenever you're working the right side, you are just dropping your color changes to the back, or you're dropping your yarn to the back. And like we just covered previously, when you're working on an even numbered row and you're working on the wrong side, you're keeping all of these to that same side as you're doing your color changes. All right, next tip. I am going to show you how to only have to count about 5 times. Now you may double check more times than that, but there's only going to be about 5 times that you have to count your stitches, and I will show you where those are going to be. Those are going to be at the start of each of these color block sections. So one here, and then this one, this one, this one, and this one. And then you'll probably have to count again up here just to make sure you're getting to the top of the tree. But the color changing on this pattern is super intuitive, and I absolutely love it. So I want to show you how to do that. So I have made it past my first section of the flared shape of the tree, which is the lower section of the tree. I cut my yarn when I made it to the most narrow part of that section, and I rejoined right here as I start making this next section. Those are the only times you're going to actually want to break your yarn. You can see that I did that here, and then I re-added my yarn here as I went on the front side on an odd numbered row. This is how you're going to know how to make your color changes every time. So let me scroll in and show you. All right, so I have begun one of my rows on the right side of my tree. I am a few rows in here on the tapering of the second kind of color block section of the Christmas tree. And I want to show you how to, as you're going along, not have to count your stitches. So the pattern repeat, or the pattern method, what it does is after you make your first row of green, okay, this is the right side on an odd numbered row, your even numbers coming back the other way are always going to be identical to that row. So you're going to have 2 rows that are exactly the same, And then the next one up, the green, is going to be 1 stitch shorter, and this natural section will be 1 stitch longer on each of the sides. That is going to happen on an odd numbered row. And then when you turn and work the other way, again, it is just a copying. So you're just mirroring the color change as you work your way back down an even numbered row. When you're going this direction, you're just going to mirror the color. And then you know the next time you make it to an odd numbered row, again on the right side of your work, you're going to make your green 1 stitch shorter and your natural section is going to be 1 stitch longer. This is what that looks like. So as you're working your way down, so again, I don't even know the number of stitches right here because I don't have to count. I'm just working my way down until I get to that green. I'm an odd numbered row. I'm on the right side of my work. So I know that on this row, I'm going to need to make 1 more natural colored stitch than it was in the previous row and 1 less green. So I'm going to actually make my color change over top of this stitch right here. So I'm working my way down. Okay, I'm making 2 more natural colored stitches. Okay, so that would be mirroring the previous row. And now I'm going to make 1 more natural colored stitch to cover up this green one. I'm of course making my color change with the last yarn over of that last stitch. I tighten that down a little bit to make sure my tension is matching, and off I go on the green. It's literally that easy. So every time you're working on your right side, you know that your green is going to be 1 stitch shorter than your previous row. And that is how you get this angled shape without having to count every single row. And then after I complete my green over here, I will see you there and I'll show you how you're going to make your color change at the end of this green section. Again, without having to count any of these, I can just go along as fast as possible. This is also why I do not like carrying my yarn, because it's just way faster for me to crochet without carrying. All right, so I'm nearing the end of the green section of this row. And again, I am on the front side of my work. So I know that it's an odd numbered row, and so that means I know that I'm going to adjust the number of green stitches and natural stitches. So we're tapering in. So my natural part of this row is going to be increasing by 1 stitch, and the green is going to be decreasing by 1 stitch, so we can continue with that angle. So when I get to that point, when I get to this last green stitch, instead of this one being green, it's going to be natural. So I will change my color after this one, because again, I want my next stitch to be natural. So I'm going to complete this stitch. I just reach over and I pull this across. And now when I complete that natural colored stitch, I just push it underneath, grab, and go. Didn't count. All I knew is that that was supposed to be continued at an angle, and that natural colored stitch needed to come over by 1. And this is the method that I use. This is why this panel can go so fast, because there's very, very little counting. You do have to double check once you're getting up in here to know how many stitches you've got going on, so that you know when to switch rows. But it makes it pretty easy and quick to come together. So at this point I have finished all of my pockets. I've blocked all of them as well. And I'm going to come through and I'm just going to use some scrap bits of yarn, and I am going to just thread the yarn through to identify where each of the pockets are, so that I can go and embroider on the numbers and do any decorations that I want to do before I actually sew them onto the tree. So I'm just going to take my little bit of yarn here. This is just kind of showing you how I do each of these pockets. Each of the pockets is 12 stitches wide, so I am just going to start from the end and count in 12 stitches, and I'm just going to weave my little scrap piece of yarn very roughly through just to mark where the pocket is. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This marks the end of my very first pocket, and just roughly Kind of weave your tapestry needle through, making sure you're coming out at 12 stitches across at the top too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Weaving it under that and pulling it through. And I'm going to just do that for all of the pockets for each one. And I will then have my marks so I can come back through and embroider on all of my numbers. And this is also when you go to attach these pockets onto the Christmas tree, you're going to be sewing, of course, around the edges, and then you'll also be sewing up this this same kind of invisible line with whatever color you choose to use to separate out each of the pockets. And so then you'll be left with just your little openings on top here, and then the next 12 stitches, and so on and so forth. So let's take a closer look at the embroidery and how to place on the pockets and seam those on. So first of all, let's take a look at the embroidery. Now here's the pocket that I'm about to seam on. I do provide in the pattern a up-close photo of all of these, the little embroidery, so that you can copy it. It's a very simple back stitch embroidery. Obviously looking a lot cuter on the front. And I just use the contrasting color that I use for the neutral color on the tree panel. And using my tapestry needle, I just embroider those little numbers on. Now you could certainly use cute little like wooden numbers. I've seen those on Amazon, and those are really fun too. You can get little wooden numbers that you could paint or just leave wooden and use them more just like dangly little decorations. Or you can actually buy little tiny pieces of wood in different shapes, like a star or something, and just use a marker and write the number on. So there's lots of different options if you don't feel like you want to do the embroidery, but it goes pretty quick once you get going. So this is in general how I lay my pockets out. It's looking a little bit messy still because it's sort of in progress. This very first one is done. The 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is complete at this point. Let me scroll in so you can see that a little bit closer. So you're going to start by laying your pocket, your very first pocket, on the third row up from the bottom with the green. So count 3 rows up where your green begins at the bottom of your tree, and that's the row that you're going to line up the bottom of your pocket. And I do provide a graph in the written pattern of the pocket placement. So you can see the tree is the lighter green out here, and then the pockets are the dark green. And it shows you by, exactly where to lay the pocket over which stitch of the tree, and so that they'll line up all evenly. But what you're going to do in general is you'll start by placing it on that third row, and then you'll space the pockets by 3 rows in between each one. So it will look a lot cleaner. It's looking a little bit messy still right now, but let's go ahead and I am going to show you how I place this and seam it on, and then how I seam up the pocket in between, this little separator right here. Now before I actually placed my pockets, I went in and I placed these stitch markers that mark the corners of where each of the pockets lay. So these are the 2 bottom corners, and these ones are the 2 top corners of the pocket that I am about to put on. It just makes it faster for me as I go in to seam it on. Here's the last little square pocket that will go on top. So the corners just line up to where those stitch markers are, and then that gives me a visual of exactly where I need to be aiming for when I seam it on. So that's how I recommend doing it. You certainly can count, but that would be a lot of counting, so it's easier for me to just visualize that ahead of time by using the stitch markers. All right, so here's the long tail that I left. I use a tail that's at least 3 times longer than the pocket. It is probably more than you need, but the last thing I want to do is have to add more yarn. And if there's extra, I will just use it to seam the middle of the pocket there. So just thread onto your tapestry needle here. All right, so now what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to line up my very first stitch. I want to land in this stitch where I placed my stitch marker. So I'm actually going to bring my needle, it's already attached. through this next stitch to the right of it so that it can come out the stitch that I want it to actually end up in. All right, so I'm pulling it through, and that is where my very top pocket is going to land, okay? And then my bottom pocket is going to end right here. So this is 13 stitches, just like this is 13 stitches. And so as I weave through each and every stitch as I go along the edge here, it'll end up right down here. And then I will be seaming across the bottom here, which this one is 24 stitches across, and then back up, ending up here at this stitch marker. So I'm going to just get you going. You don't need to watch me do the whole thing, but all right, so now that it's attached, I'll go ahead and bring it just along the edge, pick up that next edge stitch, and in that exact same way, just picking up a stitch like this, and I'm just going to whip stitch all the way down. Picking up the next stitch, and again, it's just one by one. It's like this all the way down. You can see where I placed my stitch marker here. I want the last one to be coming out of this hole right here. Got my last edge of my row, and there it goes. See, so that starts to happen really quick as you get going on these pockets. Okay, so there is the edge. All right, so now I'm going to show you how I go across the bottom. It's a very, very similar. I'm going to be matching up stitch by stitch. I just tuck this one in. This was my starting tail. For now, I'm just going to kind of tuck it under. I'll go back under and weave that to the back and snip it off. Okay, so for this bottom one, we've got your first stitch right here. So I'm going to bring my needle through that one from the front to back like this. And then in a similar way, just picking up this stitch right here. Bringing that through. And this one's a little bit easier to tell because you're literally just going to be going stitch by stitch. Okay, I've got 2 more stitches here. I'm about to end right where my stitch marker is with my last stitch of the row. So here we've got my final stitch, which is this one right here, and it's going to go right into where my stitch marker is. So I'm pushing it through the front and coming right out where I marked that stitch marker. And there you have it. Okay, so we've got the one side, the one nice clean bottom, and then I'm going to simply go up this side just like I came down this side. Okay, so that's not going anywhere. All right, so now that we have the border seamed on, take a look at how that looks. Nice and matched up with the one below it. You can take those stitch markers out now, but what I will do is show you how I seam up the middle of the pocket as well. I'm going to leave enough to bring that to the back and either weave it in or just tie it off on the back. Nobody's going to see the back, so you don't really have to worry about it. All right, so I'm going to take this extra yarn here, and I am going to do a simple back stitch. And if you can see on this one, I do 3 back stitches. I tried it multiple different ways. I tried it with every single stitch. I tried it with contrasting colors, and for me, I decided to go with the matching color. So I use the, to seam it up with the same color as the pocket. So I'm gonna use the red on this one. And then I decided to do 3. And then I do an extra little back stitch to secure this middle part. Again, that's where it's gonna be tugging on when you're using the little pockets. So I wanted that to be really secure in the corner. So where you've got your blue yarn, I start from back to front. So I'm actually going to take this, I'm going to bring it around the back, and I'm going to bring my needle right up where the bottom of that row is. So I elected to go through the very first row instead of like right below it. So again, you can play around, see what you like, how it looks. Just bring that through. I'm leaving on the back, I can feel it with my left hand there, I'm leaving a few stitches, or I'm leaving a few inches on the back of yarn tail. All right, so I can remove that little bit of yarn there. Really only need to know where I'm aiming for up at the top at this point, okay? And so then what I do is I bring it up about a third of the way right along this row where we have the horizontal dashes. I'm just doing it the same on every pocket, so I'm just getting used to where I'm putting that in. And I bring it back to the back, pull that through. Okay, and then with the back stitch, what you'll do is bring it up at the top of where you want your next little section to be. So for me, it is, I'm just kind of feeling it through the back here, right there. And I'm going to back stitch, which means I'm going to bring it back down into this same one where I brought it out last time. Okay, second little section, and finally bring it up the top again. Make sure this one's kind of laying flat. It's a little bit hard to do it on the video because you want to make sure that you're bringing it up at the right spot from the back to front. Right through that one. Okay, that's why I'm going to pull out that blue. Okay, back stitching back down through this one, and then I'll show you kind of how I fasten it off. I do one more stitch. So what I do is I bring it up, make sure you're bringing it up at the row that it should be lined up with. Mine is right there because this is where my stitch marker is. So I'm bringing it over, bring it through, and then back down and back stitching back into this one. Pull that through. And I like to pull it hard enough to where it actually leaves a little bit of a divot at the top of that pocket. It just kind of, I don't know, gives it a little bit more definition as to where that pocket is. And then I do this one twice because again, I want to make sure that top little stitch is really nice and secure, and then I will tie that off on the back really well. Okay, so pulling that through. Let's look at that. And there you have your little pocket.